Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Live Open Forum. I'm your host, Captain Logan. It is Wednesday afternoon. It is 3 o'clock Central Time, and that means it's time for me to chat with you folks for a full hour and answer a whole bunch of questions as rapid fire and lickety-split as humanly possible. I want to thank my chat moderator, as always, Danny Nixon, for being here to help me out. This is his third week in a row doing this for us, and he may not be available every time, of course, but it's super awesome for him to help us out once again today, and he makes this show run so much more smoothly as I don't have to constantly scan and scour for questions as we move along. If we don't get to your question, it's Danny's fault. So you can go complain to him. If we don't get to your question, it's not my fault anymore. I'm totally, my hands are washed of that. I just got a super chat from Michael McAllister. Whenever somebody wants to do a super chat, I'll make sure and prioritize that question, regardless of what Danny is sending me. I'm just kidding about that whole washing my hands of it thing. Danny, thanks for helping me out. But if you want to do a super chat, that's super cool of people to do that. We really sure appreciate it. If you're not familiar with the whole super chat thing, you can. And honestly, I'm assuming on your end, it's really clear and easy to figure out how to do that. I've never been on a live show on the other side on YouTube before, so I actually don't know how to do that. I'm assuming that there's just a thing there that should... If anybody's confused about how to do that, talk to Michael McAllister, because he just sent one for $4.99. Thanks, buddy. And all he says is, hi. Hi, Michael, and thank you very much for your support of the program here. But the idea of the Super Chat is you make a little donation, and then that ensures that your comment or your question gets read and answered on air. So anyway, here we are, just hanging out again on a Wednesday afternoon. This is now the 2-month mark of doing this show every single week. That's absolutely insane. That we've already been doing this long. I cannot even get my mind around that. So stuff going on right now on the channel. We hi everybody, getting a whole lot of highs from people, and yeah, but I'm not going to read all the highs unless you want to do a super chat. If you do a super chat, then I'll read your high. But lots of highs there in the comments. Base EXE, Noah O. Hi everybody, good to see you. Already, Tank Gunner, Heyo, whole ton of people already in the comments there, ready for action. So stuff going on the channel right now. I just put up the first part yesterday of the Geekvolution Omnibus Volume 8. Incidentally, this is also week 8 of this show, but it's called week 7 because the first week it had a different title, so I started numbering it the week after. That's neither here nor there. It's just kind of an amusing coincidence. Anyway, the Omnibus is getting really out of hand. This particular episode is insanely long. A whole lot of stuff that Eric and I had to review. If we skip a week like we did, and there are 3 weeks of material, you can be pretty sure that there's going to be a whole lot of stuff. We've got another part of that'll come up probably tomorrow, sometime this for tomorrow, and that will have He Made Me Watch and You Made Me Watch. I reviewed 3 movies this time from folks who made $20 donations and made requests that way, and if you'd like to do that, I will chat about anything within reason, which basically means just anything not rated X, and stuff that I can easily get my hands on and won't cost me an arm and a leg. But if you're interested in doing that, you just send me a personal message on Facebook or send me an email. My email address is listed in the About page on the channel, or you can get that email address from the description in the Omnibus. And you can also just make a donation at, you can just make a pledge, excuse me, at Patreon. And the $20 tier gives you that perk, and you can just do it one time through there if you want to, or you can just send me a one-time donation after you've talked to me and we've decided what it is that I'm going to chat about, and I'm already getting lots more of those. So I'm excited about that. It's making me stretch my legs a lot. It's been really educational, and I'm talking about a lot of stuff really outside of my comfort zone, which is really good for me as a reviewer and just as a student of popular culture. So let's go ahead and start getting into stuff, shall we? And I'm sure I'll chat about other random things as we move along that come to my brain. Also, something else I wanted to mention is last night, the Treknado crew and I just did a commentary for Star Trek The Motion Picture. We're going back to the beginning of the Star Trek movies, and we're going to do all of them over the coming months. And that went really well and was a lot of fun, and that'll come up a little bit later today. Is everybody ready? Everybody into the pool. Here we go. Andrew Follett. Hi there, Andrew. I don't know how big into Lego you are, but since the Lego Incredibles game got leaked, which I didn't know about, are there any IPs you wish to become Lego sets or video games? Yeah, so I'm not huge into building Legos, but my wife and I have been hip deep in collecting and playing the Lego games going all the way back to Star Wars on the GameCube. And I think we played I think we started with the original trilogy, which was Lego Star Wars 2. They did them in chronological, like in world order, as opposed to how the movies were made. And then we went back and played that first game, and we kept playing them all the way up, going into Indiana Jones and then Batman, et cetera, et cetera. I have kind of gotten a little bit bored with those and lost interest in them to some degree. I was really enjoying Lego Dimensions for a while, and I kind of dropped off on that as well. And now that game has been totally canceled. I don't think it sold the way they were hoping it would, and I think they tried to sell it to to too many kinds of people at the same time, which there's a certain logic to that, given all the sets they had. But I think that kind of just diminished their earnings, where they tried to be all things to all people, and it kind of diluted it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And anyway, so unfortunately that's not being made anymore, but it's made those sets really cheap, so we've been going back and buying some of the ones that we don't have. We have a fairly large collection of Lego Dimensions stuff. The big one that I was hoping for and kind of thought we would get for Dimensions with the Lego Batman movie, and I think I probably talked about this when we first reviewed them, I thought that there might have been a little bit of a commercial for later sets for maybe the third wave of Lego Dimensions going on in Lego Batman, with all the Warner Brothers properties that were villains in that movie that aren't Batman villains. And I thought we might get a Matrix set, and that's what I was really hoping for. Now I'd love to see a straight up Matrix game. I think that would be really awesome. I don't know how many people would be interested in that at this point, but it didn't seem like a crazy pipe dream at the time, because Agent Smith was still a thing that they thought was well known enough that they made it one of the bad guys in the Lego Batman movie. And after all, the second wave of Lego Dimensions gave us things like E.T. and The Goonies, and like I said, they tried to make that for everybody. And so, but they were hitting the 80s nostalgia button really hard with that. So, yeah, my big answer at this point is The Matrix. A lot of the ones I was hoping for, they've made already, like Jurassic Park and things like that. And as far as just straight up sets, I mean, I was really hoping for Ghostbuster stuff, and at this point, we've gotten that. So a lot of the licenses I was hoping they would get, they've gotten at this point. Super chat question. Oh, Michael McAllister apparently has a super chat question outside of hi, which is remarkable because I don't see that, but somehow Danny does. I don't know how that's even happening, but his question is, what is your favorite Stanley Kubrick film? I have to admit I have not seen as many as I probably should have. I've seen bits and pieces of 2001. I've never watched all the way through it, and obviously that is a visually stunning movie, and it has some really captivating ideas in it, but I can't call that my favorite because I haven't sat down and ever watched all of it in its entirety, which is probably crazy, me being the science fiction fan that I am. But it's one of those movies that I never think to sit down and watch, because it's like, yeah, 2001, I know what that is, and then I move on and watch something else. So I guess it's The Shining, which Eric would shoot me for, because he doesn't like that movie because he doesn't think it makes enough sense. But it's, of course, a visually stunning masterpiece, and if you can get yourself out of the novel and take it on its own terms, I think that is a remarkable film. But beyond that, I haven't ever watched like an entire film of his. I tried to watch Clockwork Orange at some point, and it was too much for me. I got 15 minutes into that, and I think that's Kubrick, and I just could not take it. Okay. Oh, okay. So Danny says that that was just a question from the super chat guy, but was not actually a super chat question. Okay. Maybe he meant it to be, and he just wrote hi, and it didn't occur to him to actually put the whole question in. Anyway, so we've answered his question. I feel good about that. Blue Dragon 5, Cap, where do you think we're going with Aegis in the Tick season 2? Yeah. Well, that is the $10 million question, right? So we reviewed the Tick season 1, the second part of it, this week on the Omnibus, and that's not up yet. That'll be part of Primetime Crisis, and you'll see that tomorrow. So I don't want to talk too much about that and give things away for folks that have not watched that show, but we'll have a full-blown spoiler review up for you really, really soon. Pardon me. But so Aegis is this government agency that takes care of all official superhero business, and it's one of these superhero worlds, kind of like Marvel around Civil War, where we have and like Watchmen, where we have sanctioned superheroes, and I guess Manos does it with Red Knight too, where we have superheroes sanctioned by the government, and it's been this real shadowy, kind of shady agency, and more so by the end of the season, and we don't know exactly what's going on, but there seems to be something kind of ominous about it. I think we're going to find out that a lot of the superheroes are either not as altruistic as they're making it out to be, and we're going to do a absolute power corrupts absolutely kind of message, kind of theme with the second season, or they're going to think that that they're doing things for the greater good, and they're actually being manipulated by this agency behind the scenes. That's where I think we're going with that, and it's going to be really interesting to see how well it can get comedy out of that, because that sounds like an ultra serious place to go with it, and it seems like it could be really redundant to continue doing big conspiratorial things, but then it might just be there's a bigger conspiracy that was looming in the background, and if you really watch for it, you realize that it was there all the time, and so it won't feel like this jarring thing, and like they don't have any other stories to tell, or they don't know where they're going. Edlin clearly has a big plan for all of this, and so I suspect that it's just going to be kind of a conspiracy Tick show, and that's going to be part of the I'm really excited to see where that goes, and I'm excited that I don't feel like I can easily call it and tell you exactly where we're going with that. Base EXE, what character would you pick to have a crossover with the Tick? 2 Tick questions in a row. I've always said it would be fun to see Batman Tick. We keep crossing over Batman 66 with different things in comics, although it's been a while since we've done that. I think the last one was Wonder Woman. Maybe there was one more after that. I forget. But that's a thing I would love to see. And it would be a big challenge to make them different enough characters. But I think I certainly think it could be done. I think under the wrong pin, they could kind of just the Tick could seem too much. Or Batman. What would happen is Adam West Batman would probably get too much like in the flavor of the Tick and get kind of too silly. He of course takes himself really seriously, and there's just a lot of absurdity in the things he says, and he doesn't seem to realize that he's, as I always say, created this culture of dependence, where if you take him out of that world, it completely falls apart. The Tick, I guess, sort of has that once he goes to the city, where he kind of solves everybody's problems for them, but there's more of a brains of the operation in Arthur. Although I guess we sometimes even do that with Robin a little bit. I'm rambling on, but I think the way that you make that work is you have Adam West Batman, by comparison to the Tick, look like really serious Batman. I kind of think that would be the way to take that, and it could be really hilarious, where Batman sees almost like this really silly mirror of himself. He's like, oh, I'm not like that, am I? And I think that could be really fun. Jeffrey Patron, what do you think of a band making music specifically as a compendium to a comic series? Are you talking about like these concept albums that we do sometimes, where you have a musical group that makes an album, and then you read the comic that goes with it, and you kind of need both to really appreciate it, or one just sort of serves as a soundtrack to it? I don't know if that's what you mean by compendium, but I mean, those things can be really, really cool and interesting. it's still really experimental. Like, we've done a lot of them, but it doesn't feel like there's a real straight up format or like standard for doing that. But yeah, I like that idea. I haven't honestly looked at a whole lot of those. We do this sometimes with novels too. Kevin J. Anderson did a thing a couple years ago that was like that, and I think you can start to feel really self-indulgent. Sometimes one ends up being a lot better than the other, where you have a comic that would stand alone just fine on its own, but in order to make it feel really necessary, we put in the lyrics of the album where you have to have that, and it seems really intrusive and unnecessary. And I guess that can happen vice versa. I think it's a cooler idea to have a soundtrack that's written specifically for the comic, where you wouldn't have to have the comic, but you see how they go together, so it's like scoring it. And that gets weird because when you're reading a comic, you're in control of pacing to some degree. But I like the idea of scoring a comic book because by the very nature of the thing, it doesn't have any sound, and what you're listening to when you read something can majorly influence your experience and even sometimes your interpretation of the thing, and just the way that our senses all go together to create our perceptions is a fascinating thing to study. There are certain albums that I will forever relate to things I was listening to when I was reading a thing. One of them is, this is odd, when I was reading Walt Simonson's Thor, I was listening to an album called No Doubt of Sunshine by, it's funny, I remember the album name, but I'm spacing the band name. It's Waterdeep, and I will forever think of Walt Simonson's Thor when I listen to that album. What else? Mario 500 now. Would you consider GizmoDuck of the DuckTales TV show a superhero? I don't know. I haven't watched enough of that in the longest time. I don't remember anything about GizmoDuck except for what he looks like, and that he's sort of a duck version of RoboCop, if memory serves, but I don't remember anything about how he's characterized or anything. Yeah, he's been for a couple weeks now asking questions about GizmoDuck, and we keep not getting to it. So I'm glad we finally did. When I was a kid, I thought that that was a really visually striking character, and it always stuck with me. I thought it was really cool knowing about him. I had a Happy Meal toy with that character, and for whatever reason, I remember that being one of my favorite Happy Meal toys when I was collecting. I used to have a huge collection of Happy Meal toys. I kind of missed those. Daniel Davis, thoughts on the news of a new Gods film? I think it could be interesting. So I was about to say, as we said on the Omnibus, you guys haven't seen this yet. We talk about that in the Captain's Log portion of the Omnibus, which we put at the end of the show this time. So we haven't posted it yet, but I'm going to try to get that up today because, of course, time sensitive. But that's allegedly, and I always have to say allegedly with Warner Brothers until we start to actually see set photos and stuff. And even then, I'm not sure about it until we get a trailer. But that's Ava DuVernay, I think is her name. I botched it in the Captain's Log, so I apologize about that when you see that. I read her name wrong. I thought there was an M in it. I think I said DuVernay or something. It's DuVernay, I think is her name. Anyway, she just directed. So she directed Selma, which I loved, and I did a 10-minute review of that a couple years ago, and I can't believe that's been that long. And she just directed A Wrinkle in Time, which I thought was absolutely abysmal. And I don't know what happened with that movie. It's a complete quagmire how that thing turned out, and the directing in that is horrible, in my opinion. Just all these huge close-ups on faces. It looks like a CW thing. The whole thing, or like old CW, and it looks like a TV movie. And I don't understand what happened there, and with respect to what she was thinking when she decided to direct it that way. And so I'm not immediately excited about this. There might have been really strange behind the scenes stuff that would explain why that movie turned out the way it did, because she seems to be a really competent director otherwise, although from things people say, everybody seems to like her other stuff. I've only seen the other one movie, and two does not a pattern make. So I can't say for sure obviously what exactly happened there, but I want a New Gods movie, especially with the way we really botched and oversimplified the mythology in Justice League. And reportedly, that movie is not supposed to have really anything to do with the DCEU at large. It's probably going to technically be set in that continuity, but it's not supposed to connect to anything. It's not supposed. I don't even think it's going to go to Earth. It's not supposed to have Superman or anybody that we've seen already in it, and so they can really build that mythology from the ground up. So I don't know if she's right for it. That seems like a weird pick right now. It seems weird that they would go to her as that movie, as Wrinkle in Time is bombing. So I don't know what that's about. But I didn't think Wrinkle in Time was bombing until I realized how much money that cost to make. It doesn't look like $100 million movie. It looks like it got a TV movie budget, but it really did cost that much. So it seems to be in trouble. And it's weird that that Warner's decided, oh yeah, let's pick her up right now as this is going on. But that might be something they had in the pipeline for a while, and they're only just now getting around to telling us about it. But I don't know why they would announce it after that. You'd think they'd have second thoughts. I think it's kind of unlikely that ends up happening exactly the way it's been announced so far, as a lot of these things are falling apart after all. And again, we don't know exactly all the reasons, but Joss Whedon's not even doing Batgirl anymore. That's one of the earlier things that was announced as we started getting into this new wave of DC movie announcements with kind of a new strategy of getting farther away from making a big deal out of interconnected continuity and just making movies. And I'm glad that they're still doing that. As I keep saying, I just wish that they would wait to announce some things even as they're getting them started, at least pre-production stuff, until it's clearer that more of these things are actually happening. Because at the very least for me, I kind of feel like I'm wasting my time a little bit talking about it. All I can really say is, yeah, that might be really interesting if it happens. I just don't know if it's actually going to happen. And then, like, half these things end up never getting made. So, I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening with that. Sanburbia Pictures, having written a novel about food, he capitalized food with all caps. Did your research lead you to exploring new and perhaps unknown foods? And did it change your own eating habits? Yeah, I don't think I discovered any new foods doing that. The research I did was more about the food industry and what food culture is actually like in this country, and myths we have about what's actually good for us versus what isn't, and a lot of that kind of stuff, which isn't necessarily what I expected the novel to be about, but I kind of got fascinated by that as I started looking up at documentaries that were trying to debunk myths in the culture. Like I said, both about what we think is healthy and unhealthy for us, and also how we think our food is made. And a lot of people will tell you when you start looking into that, it will make you not want to ever eat meat again, and avoid a lot of things. And I definitely had that experience with it. I still eat meat, and I haven't completely avoided everything I ever ate before, but it has made me much more conscious, at the very least, about about how the food industry affects the environment, and about the things that I've always been told by the commercial food world that is good for me, that is not as quite accurate about that. I won't get into all those things, but yeah, I do. It has changed my eating habits. I'll tell you, I don't drink milk anymore, hardly at all. Occasionally, I'll have a chocolate milk because I just love the taste of chocolate milk. But I used to drink milk every day, and there's a lot of the research I did made it really clear that milk is not as good for you as an adult as it is as a child, and we really shouldn't be drinking as much milk as we do. And so when milk commercials say milk, it does a body good, my answer to that is, well, yeah, sometimes, and depends on what body we're talking about. So yeah, I didn't really discover anything new, but it has definitely changed the way I look at my attitudes about food, at the very least. Connor Nielsen, I'm going to be seeing Vertigo in theaters in an hour. What classic films do you want to see in theaters? That's awesome. I like Vertigo a lot. That would be a really cool one to see. I'm trying to think of classic films that make a lot of sense to put on a big giant screen. Like, I love 12 Angry Men, but I don't know how necessary it would be to see that huge. That's basically made minimalist, like a Twilight Zone episode. So like you wouldn't really need to see that on a huge screen. But then, I went to Miracle on 34th Street that way because I was going to do a rewind on it, and I hadn't seen it before, so I went and saw it on the big screen. And there's some great cinematography in that movie. So even though it's not a big action thing, it made a lot of sense to see it big. I recently reviewed why can't I think of things? It's a Wonderful Life, and I just on principle kind of want to go make sure I see that in the theater at some point. Psycho, I would love to see on the big screen. Absolutely. I guess because you said Vertigo, I'm mostly thinking of Hitchcock and black and white things right now when you say classic films. But there's but you know of things that like were made really early in my lifetime or before that we think of, or just before that we think of as big classic things. I finally have gotten to go see some of these things in the theater, like Alien, which was just obviously stunning and a big deal that I got to see that. Huge. I've never seen Terminator 2 in the theater. I'd like to do that. I've still never seen Jurassic Park in the theater, which I was supposed to do last year and something came up and I wasn't able to go. But I was like 7 when that movie came out, and it was borderline for my mom, and she thought it might be too scary for me and she wouldn't let me go. And I saw every other Jurassic Park movie in the theater, and considering that by comparison they're not great, I always wished that I could have seen the original, and I'm sure I'll get the opportunity again. And I have seen 89 in the theater now, which I didn't get to do when I was a kid because I was 5 and I was a little bit too young to go. And I've never seen, as far as superhero stuff goes, I've never seen Richard Donner's Superman in the theater. That would be a big deal. I have seen Ninja Turtles in the theater a couple times, but and I think one of those times was right when it came out. But the fact that the first movie I ever saw in the theater when I was really, really little was Superman 4. I really want to see Richard Donner's Superman at some point because I've seen the worst looking one in the theater, even though I don't remember that. That dope channel. Cap, did you notice in the Infinity War trailers? Okay, so he's asking the heart-shaped arc reactor question. I actually answered that on the Captain's Log this week, so I'm not going to tackle that here. If you asked a question for the Omnibus this week, we got through like 95% of those. So if you ask me one of those today here, I probably won't answer it because it comes up in the Omnibus. But yeah, it is crazy that the arc reactor. I got to go back and look at it because I didn't notice that. He claims that the arc reactor is heart shaped. I think that might be a little bit too on the nose with the whole heart motif thing. But yes, I do think that they're very conscious of that and have been. Reptile Dude 21, a cap. Hi. What type of writer are you? Do you outline pretty heavily? Okay, thanks for continuing on with that because I don't know. I don't know how to label myself. Do you outline pretty heavily before actually writing, or do you dive right in and see where the story takes you? What is either process for you like? Yeah, I've talked about this a lot. So for anybody that's heard this before, sorry if this is boring, but yeah, I am pretty anti-outlining for myself. I want to make sure that my fiction is character-driven to the point where in the moment, I feel like if it's really going well in the moment, I feel like as I'm deciding what my character is doing, it feels more like he's making choices for himself, and then it's all about actions and consequences. So when I say Franklin Bryce would do this, then other things react based on what choice he made, and I cannot do that in outlining. And some people seem to be, especially like writers' rooms, and when it's a more collaborative thing, you kind of have to handle it a little bit differently, where there's at least an overarching outline, and then you can have some of those character choices made in the moment, some of the smaller things, and we can still kind of get our characters to the places where they have to go in such a way where it still feels like it wasn't artificial. But what I prefer to do, sort of like you're playing a Telltale game or something. But what I like to do is have ideas about where it might go and then allow it to completely subvert my own expectations. So I always write toward an ending, but the ending I initially come up with is almost never where it ends up actually going. And I would be lying if I said I think of an ending, I have a concept, a character, an ending, and I make up everything else. That's not true. I don't outline in the sense that I don't write a bunch of the plot points and things out. I don't say this must happen and this must happen, and then hold myself to that, whether it makes sense that the character would choose to do the things he's doing or not, and that the other people around him would choose to do what they do based on that. But I do come up with lots of potential ideas for what for like mythology things and sometimes plot things, but much more just character stuff when I'm doing something kind of mundane. So I've always said I do my plotting in the shower. I do my characterizing in the shower. I used to do this when I was a kid, mowing my mom's lawn with a lawnmower. I did a lot of my thinking vacuuming, and so it'll just be things that I file away. And but like I said, a lot of that is stuff that is kind of world building things, and then character traits. And what I do is I just file it away, and it tends to naturally, like you worry that you'll forget stuff if you don't write them down. I have the same thing. My philosophy on writing is very much in line, for the most part, like 90%, with Stephen King. And if you read Stephen King's on writing, you'll see him say a lot of things that I agree with. A few things that I got from him, a lot of things where we just lined up, and I already had come to those things before I read that book. And one of those is outlining and even making notes. Stephen King says that he doesn't write a lot of notes down. He says that if it's worth going in the story, it will wind up there. And I kind of have that very same thing. I like to make it as organic as possible. And that seems to only happen if I'm having an out-of-body experience. Now, I don't treat it like a spiritual thing. I don't mean to say that my characters are literally alive and they're speaking through me. There are some writers who really do seem to believe that. But like with Mary Poppins and stuff. I don't have that. But it does, when it's going well, experience. I always compare it to, I always use the metaphor of Isaac Mendez in Heroes painting the future, where his eyes roll into the back of his head and he paints a picture, and then when his eyes come back forward, he sees this remarkable thing that he made that he doesn't remember doing. That's what it's like when it's going well for me. And one of the reasons I love to write is because, again, when it's going well, it's almost the same kind of entertainment for me as reading, because it feels like I'm reading the thing that I'm writing as I'm writing it, and it's fun for me. So it's like if I never had any books to read, I'm writing one for myself, and but not just to go back and read. It's like I just bought a novel, and now I'm reading that book, and it's something somebody wrote just for me. That's what it's like when it's going well. And then the thing you have to be really careful of is that you walk that line between being self-indulgent and writing something for yourself that other people will enjoy and appreciate and understand, because they are also enough like you and have your sensibilities. AMC Comics, what other DC or Marvel property do you feel would lend itself to the Telltale style? That's a good question. I hesitate to not say maybe about anything could work, just because I wouldn't have thought Guardians made sense for that, because that's such an action-driven thing. That's not to say that you can't tell like really deep character-driven stories with Guardians. It's just one of the things that that really drives that property, that people come to for that is action. And I haven't played that game, and I assume that there's a lot of fun QuickTime events and stuff in that, because there can be action in a Telltale thing. It's just generally the good ones are more dialogue-driven. But geez, immediately. Stuff's not coming to my mind, but I know I've had thoughts about this. I think you could potentially do a really cool X-Men game, and it might be cool to do, because I don't care for the Telltale games where you keep jumping into different characters' heads. I kind of want it to be a character study about one person, and I guess it depends on what it is. Maybe that doesn't make as much sense for Guardians, but it might be cool with something more soap opera-esque like X-Men if it was almost like a vignette piece where you had different chapters that all seem to be kind of unrelated, and they're each like an hour and a half, 2 hour episode about a character, and then as it moves along, you start to see a lot of subplots coming together and converging, and then by the end, you're still one particular character, but all the characters you've been playing as come together, and that's maybe what I would do with an X-Men thing. It might be cool if the last person you played was Professor Xavier, and like you're leading your team after you played as each of the individual members of it. I think that could be really cool. And it might be neat to do a Superman one just to contrast with Batman. And it would be nice to make a really good one and use that as an argument for Superman is also a very human character and isn't just a guy with powers who never does anything wrong and is not a flawed human being. And like Eric and I have both said that the newly announced Metropolis show, even though I have huge reservations because it's done by the Gotham team, could be really cool if it's a drama about the newspaper business and if it's about investigative journalism. And it could be really cool to do a Superman game that was as much Clark Kent as it was Superman, just like we did with Batman, with Bruce Wayne, and have it also be a detective game, and then draw really clear comparisons without having Batman in it between the two, and just make it in a really clear companion piece and kind of mirror for that, where you see the differences in the ideologies, and it's really interesting to compare their versions of those two characters. And you have their version of Superman go off on his own as a real different continuity, but with the spirit of Superman, just like we did with Batman, with kind of in Earth 1 attitude. I think that would be awesome. Nicktoons 125, thoughts on the Cloak and Dagger trailer, and are you going to watch Cloak and Dagger? I may review the pilot just obligatorily. I think it looks kind of terrible, to be perfectly honest with you. It looks exactly like I expected it to, and we'll talk about that in the next Omnibus, because that came out after we recorded the first one, but I don't think it's going to be popular. I don't think I don't think a lot of people are going to watch that. Freeform needed to make something that would really stand out if they wanted to do a superhero teen drama, because even though they're not doing a lot of teen stuff on the CW, that's still gotta be a lot of the age group watching those shows. I mean, I guess I haven't looked into the demographics, but a lot of the people that and honestly, these days, I'm not hearing as many people talk about the CW shows as I used to. I don't even get a lot of complaints that we're not talking about those shows anymore, or that I'm not keeping up with them. And I think that's fallen off some, but when I do hear people talk about it, it tends to be people younger than me. It tends to be more people in that age group. So I don't know if Freeform is aware that they have massive competition, even though there aren't a whole lot of superhero characters on TV right now that are that age. I mean, there's a little bit. They are also competing directly with that, why can't I think of the name of it? That other X-Men show, The Gifted. And then of course stuff like Runaways, but I can't remember what network. Yeah, obviously that's not the same network, because is it? I can't remember. I don't think that's Freeform. I think that's someplace else. But anyway, so like I think this is the first thing Freeform is doing, and I think that's also supposed to. Is it supposed to be in MCU? I think it is. I know that's true of Runaways. I don't know if anybody realizes that. I don't know if anybody has any idea that Runaways is supposed to be part of that. And now I'm second guessing myself, but I'm pretty sure I read that was supposed to be in MCU. So anyway, yeah, I don't think that's going to go well. The acting in that doesn't look great, and it's weird that the trailer itself is coming right out and spelling out the themes of that show. It's like I'm a go-getter that with Cloak, like I'm this big go-getter who has to get everything right all the time, and I'm worried of ever failing about anything. And then she's like, I've had this horrible life, and I don't have all these chances that Cloak has, and I'm living kind of in shambles, and I'm scared of anything, and I'm real mousy, and it's really obvious that their powers are supposed to be the opposite of what their worldviews are and how they've had to live their lives, and like just show that. Don't like come out and spell all that out to me in a trailer. It makes me feel like they're gonna hold my hand the entire way through that show. I'll give the pilot a chance because I like those characters. I have liked Cloak and Dagger in the past. That's one of Sarah's favorite parts of Maximum Carnage. We kind of came to like those characters because of that series, but it doesn't look good to me. William Parcell, why do you think Robin is the only sidekick to really stick around? That's interesting. We don't see any new Bucky's, and Supergirl hasn't been really been a sidekick for a while. Yeah, I think partly it's because of the legacy thing. I think it's because Batman has had a Robin going almost all the way back. So like he's introduced in 1939. He has a Robin shortly thereafter, and we're used to Batman having a sidekick, and he needs he kind of needs somebody to ground him a little bit and keep him connected to his humanity. But if you don't want to think about the psychology and the philosophy of all of that, and you just want to look at it commercially, he's always had a Robin, and the reason the character was invented in the first place, to have so that kids could kind of imagine themselves in Robin's shoes. And of course, you don't need that because kids want to imagine themselves as Batman. But I think there's still a grain of truth to that in that people like that there's this kind of like childlike wonder mixed in with Batman's adventures. So even if you want to be Batman, you have a character there that more represents you, and so it's easier to sink your teeth into it because Batman isn't exactly really like any of us. And so I'm not saying that Batman isn't often a really relatable character, but he needs somebody to talk to, and that keeps it lighter. So I think that's part of the reason that Robin has stuck around. But Robin, we have such a history now, and it has such a reputation for turnover with Robin, where you have different people in the Robin suit. You don't really have that with any other sidekicks that I can think of. Certainly not very many. Where you're not always going to necessarily have an Aqualad, and because of that, those characters tend to be who they are for a minute, and then eventually they don't catch on and we don't use them, or we grow them up like we did with Nightwing. And we can keep doing that with Robins. We can either kill them off, then bring them back to life, and then give them dual firearms, or we can grow them up and put somebody else in the suit. And so Robin has this huge following that is not necessarily Batman big, but it's part of that whole thing, and it might as well be. And that's the only sidekick that's ever gotten to the point where it might as well not be a sidekick. Robin is so super popular that he doesn't even need Batman anymore. And there are fans like Rob's Rogues, who was in the third season, I think, of Who Reviews the Reviewers, maybe second, I forget. But you have people like Rob who are huge Robin fans and do not necessarily care that much about Batman. And so I think that's a lot of why he stuck around, is just that popularity and the contrast with the personalities and the costumes. Cinematographic, hey Captain Logan, between Hitman Legacy, Hitman Agent 47, and the 2007 movie, what is your least favorite part about Hitman? Yeah, well, I only watched like 10 minutes of that new movie because I thought it was god-awful and I could not get excited about it and into it. Eric and I are going to be doing a video game movie mania. No, that's probably not what it'll be called, but we still haven't come up with a good title for it yet. We're taking suggestions. But so I will have to sit through it at least while talking about it at some point. And I haven't seen the other Hitman in a really long time, and then I haven't played the newest game. And then the one that was on, I think is there one coming out, or was there, so there was, is it Legacy you're talking about? I forget. Like, here's the thing. I like Hitman. I'm a real casual fan of that. I suck at it, but I really like the idea and the gimmick of it, and I want to be a big Hitman fan. So I guess my least favorite thing about Hitman as a game series is that I'm no good at it. I need my wife to help me figure out where to go. And I'm not the best at aiming in FPSs or even third-person shooters in the first place. But as far as Hitman as a character, I mean, he can be a really difficult character to make sympathetic because he's he seems completely cold and inhuman, but the idea is that there is an inherent latent humanity in him that might be biological or might not. And so there is a big nature-nurture kind of question with Hitman. So I don't know. I guess with what little stuff I've looked at with that character, I guess my least favorite thing about him is just that we haven't delved as much into the psychology as I think we could, but then maybe we haven't. I just don't know because I haven't looked at it enough. So yeah, that's not a great answer, but I have not looked at enough of it to really give you a real good answer. Chewbacca's Lover, if you haven't covered it on the Omnibus, can you give your thoughts on Last Jedi's deleted scenes? I've not watched them yet. I haven't gotten a copy of that movie, so I cannot speak about the deleted scenes. Yeah, so waiting for another question here from Mr. Danny Nixon. We have about 15 more minutes. And we've answered a pretty good amount of questions so far, I think. Josh Glissano, I want to get my little sisters in comics because they're getting into superheroes. Because you're a father, what is the best comic to give to kids? I wanted to ask this last time, but I was too late. So I'm going to go to my go-to answer, which is Tiny Titans. If you have really little kids, I think that's a series that is just really fun and hilarious, and kind of a cartoon on the page that's great for boys and girls. And it's fun to read as an adult too. So I would suggest get some of that. Get the first trade, see if you like it, and read it with them. Because if you're into superheroes, if you're into DC mythology at all, there's all kinds of stuff you'll pick up on where it's making fun of things in the DCU that's all for you, that will go over your kids' heads, but there will still be plenty of stuff there that they'll appreciate, and so it's kind of layered in that way. Tiny Titans is minimalistically drawn such that I think it also simultaneously makes kids that like it anyway want to read but also want to draw, and it's pretty easy to go to that artwork and try to mimic it. And nothing against the artwork; it's great. It's pretty simple, and I think that's by design. To some degree, it's trying to look like child drawings, and so I think it's great for that. There's a mini Marvel series that is kind of does the same thing, and I also recommend that. And then beyond that, obviously the Sonic the Hedgehog comics are wonderful, and they're about to get restarted and rebooted at IDW. So that went from Archie, and that they're going to do an arc that they're going to do a mini series that wraps up everything from Archie, and then they're going to kind of start again. And that would be obviously a really wonderful place to start that. And that also seems to be a thing that kind of boys and girls like. But I would also maybe suggest, and I don't know how little of kids we're talking about, which is why I mentioned Tiny Titans. That's for more smaller kids. But I also, since we're talking about girls, would suggest the Superhero Girls. What little I've looked at with that, it's pretty clever. And yeah, so check that out. Claudio Myron, Cap, what is the criteria for an everyman? Interesting question. Grant Morrison says the appeal of Superman is he's the everyman. Others say the appeal of Spider-Man is that unlike Superman and Batman, he's an everyman. Yeah, it's an attitude thing. It depends on who's writing it. Superman can be written as this big, larger-than-life, iconic character who does no wrong, and sometimes this is done simultaneously. And he can also be written as a good old boy from Podunk, Kansas. And so it just kind of, and I don't mean this with every character, like those are both valid things, but it kind of depends on who's writing the character and what take it is, but B, who you personally identify with. Everyman is a really broad, loose term. When I think of that idea, I think of simply goes to work for a living and puts his pants on one leg at a time. I think of, when I think of everyman, I think that's simply a person who is not ultra famous. So it's Peter Parker versus Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson would have loved to have been an everyman. not an everyman. But then you have people in Hollywood like Drew Carey that we think of as an everyman because of his attitude, the way he carries himself, and the way he built himself up basically from nothing. But once you achieve a certain level of success and fame, it's hard to call yourself an everyman anymore, because no matter how much you try to keep that attitude, there's no way that the fact that you are now famous and well known doesn't influence you in some way. It's difficult for me to straight up call Superman an everyman, because Clark Kent can get away with that to some degree, but he is also Superman and has had to live with that kind of fame and those grandiose expectations, and not being able to get a moment's peace if he's wearing that costume. But again, I think it also depends on where you were from and like what you think of as like privilege versus hardship. So somebody like Clark Kent, who lived on a farm and lived modestly, might still not be looked at that much as an everyman by somebody like Peter Parker, who maybe had it a little bit harder with an aunt that was like living paycheck to paycheck and that kind of thing. So I think a lot of that really depends on kind of where you came from and what your attitude about things is. Mind the Gap. Have you ever read the whole League of Extraordinary Gentlemen comic, including the recent original graphic novels? So some acronyms I'm just not familiar with. No, I've not. And it's funny that Mind the Gap that you listed all that. Have you ever read all of this? No, I've never read any of it at all. I've actually still never read any League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I always thought it was a cool concept. I just haven't gotten to it, and a lot of that is because for the longest time I pretty much only read comic books about people wearing costumes, and was not into much else beyond that. And obviously, since starting the channel years ago, I've grown a lot, and I've kind of broadened my horizons. But that's one I've never gotten around to reading. Donnie St. Pierre, do you have anything that you genuinely have no reason to own other than sentimental value? Yeah, sure. I mean, I think most people have that to some degree, unless I'm a pretty sentimental guy. I mean, there's certainly people that every now and again are fine if it's necessary selling everything they own and starting over. I'm not that guy. But unless you're that extreme, I think most of us have things that mean a lot to us, but not to anybody else. There are even things in my collection that feel very valuable to me, but that nobody else will ever care about. I have certain, so it's things like game cartridges and specific issues of comics and things like that, even a couple of VHS tapes where it's not enough to have a copy of it. It's got to be the one that I grew up with. I have certain action figures that are special to me, and that might not be worth anything, but are, if I try to go sell them, but are special to me because of memories I have associated with specifically that action figure. So if I ever broke it or lost it and had to replace it, yeah, I could replace it, but I actually can't replace it, because I can never get the exact same one again. And I'm thinking mostly about action figures with that. And there are some things that I've lost over time that I kind of miss and wish I could get back, and maybe I will find a replacement for them. But like I had a doppelganger figure. I was talking earlier about Maximum Carnage. I had a doppelganger figure from Spider-Man that I got during a kind of a rough year when I was a kid, and it was right around. It was well after my parents had broken up, but it was during a period where living with one over the other was kind of difficult, and I kind of lost myself in creative play, and these action figures were really kind of special to me. And I had this doppelganger figure along with some other figures from that period of Spider-Man. And when my son fast forward years and years, when my son was like 2, he was playing with it, and the legs were kind of brittle, and he accidentally broke the middle of it, and the legs, actually, it wasn't the legs, it was like the middle of the figure, it just popped open, and there were a couple pieces that broke, and you couldn't put it back together. And that was kind of sad that I had to throw that away. And then recently, I found another one, and I was able to rebuy it, but it's not the same because it's not the one I had. So I'm glad I was able to replace it, but it's not exactly the same. It looks exactly the same, but I know it's not. Bob the Hun, we got about 5 minutes left, folks. I'm going to answer as many more as I can in that amount of time. Do you think that George Lucas, I'll probably go for another 10 minutes or so. We started a little bit late today. Do you think that George Lucas, for all his flaws, was more creative and imaginative than Rian Johnson? People argue he took more risk. Yeah, look, a lot of people are asking me this question. I feel weird comparing them. This just isn't even a conversation I'm that interested in having. I'll do my level best. I'll try to answer it. I don't think that's true, actually, the more I'm thinking about it. I think... So I'm of two minds about the thing with Rian Johnson. My issue is not really that movie isn't imaginative enough, except for certain places. There are bits where I think that movie is trying really hard to tell you, hey, look, we're going so, we're so different, we're moving so far away from what the other movie was, and that's a big deal just because you expected it to be a carbon copy because people felt like that's what they got with the previous installment, with Force Awakens. But there are places where it still is kind of either straight up doing something that Empire kind of did, or making too big of a deal about the fact that it's aping it, and then that ends up getting kind of distracting to me. But my issues are more just kind of big, massive plot holes I feel like you can drive a truck through, and character motivations that don't make a lot of sense, and stuff like that. So I don't think Lucas's movies are more imaginative than that. My issue... I am not entertained very much at all with the Lucas movies, save some stuff. I mean, the original trilogy, if that's what we're comparing. Because obviously Lucas made the original Star Wars, but I think we're just talking about the prequels. That's what people keep asking me about. Is we had this question last week, like have you started reassessing the prequels because you didn't like Last Jedi? No, I still don't like them. It doesn't make it's not making those better, and I don't find them especially comparable, except that it doesn't seem to be that concerned, in my opinion, with whether or not ideas really follow. But I know there's people that hate me for saying that, but that's the movie I saw. But I wasn't bored watching it. Part of the reason that I don't care for that movie is because I was with it almost all the way to the end. I know there were too many kind of false endings and stuff, but I kept waiting for it to turn around, and for me, it never did, and that was really aggravating because I thought it was it kept doing things I thought were really interesting, and then kind of killing them where I didn't think they were as interesting. That's my thing with that movie. So in that way, it's not imaginative enough, but I don't think that. But I wouldn't say that Lucas's movies are somehow more imaginative than Last Jedi. John Early, does the original 1932 Scarface and His Girl Friday sound like something that's outside your sensibilities? So he's asking me that because he requested those on the omnibus with donation. I reviewed His Girl Friday for the omnibus that's half up now, so you'll see that review next time. And yeah, a little bit outside of my sensibilities, most certainly. I will try to tackle Scarface next time. Kelly Jones, do you think that Universal's monster movie verse, the dark, is that what that's called, the dark universe, would have succeeded under the leadership of Guillermo del Toro? Yeah, I mean, more than likely. You can never be sure. You'll get creators who have done really fine work in the past that can't make stuff work for a number of different reasons. If he's got real creative control, if he's kind of like the Kevin Feige of that, then obviously, yes, that's a wonderful pick, and we would probably do really well under his pen. Hamza, hey Cap, what's your favorite comic book hairstyle? Mine has to be Ultimate Peter Parker hair. That's hilarious. This is not a thing I've given a lot of thought to. I've always had a nostalgic spot for the Superman mullet. but for long hair Superman, because that's what Superman looked like when I most cared about him, because Superman had to die before I cared about him. And there are a couple of glorious covers with that hairstyle. So yeah, I love long hair Superman. Einstein Jet. That's a great username. I love that. Do you think DC's Powerless deserved to get canceled? I think that show had a lot of potential. It should have, they should have spent more time on it before they put it out. And I think it would have looked better. I think it would have it had a more solid sense of direction. And it's kind of unfortunate because one of the episodes that didn't air was one of its better episodes, but it started to fall, I think, not fall apart, but just got less funny and less engaging after the pilot. I think the pilot's really solid. I think it's really good. And then after that, I kept waiting to care. And then it has a couple of episodes that had some bite that I really enjoyed, like the one with the Riddler henchman played by the guy from iZombie. But other than that, I got really underwhelmed with it. And even the Adam West episode that didn't air but was online is just okay. So I don't know, deserved to get canceled? No, I mean, I think it might have found its footing eventually. It's exactly a Tick situation with Patrick Warburton's Tick, where it got 8 or 9 episodes and some of them didn't even air, and it just wasn't on long enough to really find its footing. I think that was already a better show. And I don't know if it would have ever really found its audience. I think it had the chance at becoming a really good show with a tiny audience and then get canceled. I don't think it ever would have been huge or anything, but it had one of my favorite sitcom openings ever. It has a really cool intro. Let me answer a couple more. William Parcell, have you ever preferred a what-if comic instead of the canon story? Yeah, you're putting me on the spot. I absolutely have. Jason and I actually just reviewed, and this would have been one of my answers anyway, but Jason and I just talked a little bit. I can't say reviewed because I didn't read it again, but I remember a lot about it. The what if, the classic what if story that was what if Peter Parker Spider-Man kept his 6 arms. And he and I both said, he had the same reaction I did without my prompting him. He was like, I wish that's what it was like. I wish that when Spider-Man got his 6 arms, he had this cloaking technology where he had 6 arms when he was Spider-Man, and then he was just a regular after that. That's a really cool idea. It would have been fun if we did that at least for a while. This is a thing I've been thinking about recently, and I'm thinking about making a list. The sheer number of what-if stories that are then later things that we actually did in canon, and that there's so many of those that makes this question really hard to answer, because there are a lot of things that we ended up doing later. And of course, there's a lot of what if stories that are that are some of the better stories, but wouldn't have made any sense to actually do. I mean, I guess you could have had the Punisher, or excuse me, the Venom symbiote take over the Punisher for like a minute or for a while. That might have been fun, and it would be cool to actually do that if we never have, in canon now. It's a thing we've done with Deadpool now. We did a what if story, and then I think we did a Venom Deadpool, but we've done an everything Deadpool. We've done an everything Venom now because we did that big event. But we had things like, what if Jane Foster had the power of Thor? And of course, Jane Foster has been Thor. I don't know if I know Thor is now Thor again, or is about to be Thor again, but I don't know what we're doing with Jane Foster because I haven't been reading that stuff lately. But it's funny that that was a story that we did in What If, and then it became an actual canon thing. So that's a tough question to answer. Blue Dragon 5, what is your favorite Stan Lee cameo ever? All on the table. It's probably still, I mean, I don't know. Some of them are kind of difficult to compare, I guess. This is a thing that I don't get super excited about talking about, but people love talking about the Stan Lee cameos. I guess the one I laughed out loud the most about was the Amazing Spider-Man one, where he's in the library and he's got headphones on and he doesn't even know there's this big battle raging behind him. That was a lot of fun. I like the one in Guardians 2 in theory, but I'm kind of with Eric that it's weird that he's not an actual Watcher, or he doesn't look like a Watcher. I don't totally know what's going on there. It's kind of annoying, but I do like that one for finally coming out and saying that those are all the same character and that he's just been gallivanting around the universe, or at least that some of them are. And that also weirdly kind of canonicizes, maybe if you want to read this far into it, all the Marvel movies outside of MCU as part of a multiverse. So that's kind of fun. I mean, he doesn't actually come out and mention any of those, but the fact that he's also been in all of those, it would be really easy to say that. So I like what that does for the continuity of it before I like the way it was actually handled. But it's but that's fun. And he's had a couple that are kind of more, sort of serious, poignant moments that are nice. And I also really like Stan Lee trying to pull the Thor hammer out of the ground with a pickup truck. That one's great too. This will be the last one I answered today. Well, we'll do one more. Danny, send me one more after this. Try to send me the best one that we've not answered yet. That Dope Channel. Cap, did you listen to at all the Black Panther album by Kendrick Lamar? I need to. I know you're not a rap guy, but to me, it made the movie that much better. Really brings Killmonger even more personality. I should. I'd love to see lyrically and stuff what that soundtrack is doing for that film, and what the thematic and character substance is of that. So I should do that. I just have not. But I also want to listen to the orchestral score apart from the film, because I just thought it was brilliant. I mean, it absolutely blew me away. So I'm going to answer one more question as soon as I get one. Thanks, Danny. Okay, here is the last question for today. Gents and maybe ladies. There may also even be some ladies. William Parcell, overall, how well do you think MCU films stand on their own, in that they can be watched as their own films without watching the other connected films? Later on, this gets harder, except for certain movies that just aren't all that interconnected to the other movies. So obviously, once you had that moment where the Russos finally throw their hands up in the air and say, like with Civil War, and say, look, we cannot keep trying to explain everything in a 2.5 hour movie when we have a billion D characters that we have to juggle. And so some of them where they're not real watchable by themselves. Now, arguably, that's still a sequel. Like, it would be weird to watch Iron Man 2 without Iron Man 1. I guess you could do it, but I don't think that's a great movie or anything, but we are clearly continuing a character arc from the beginning. So most of those sequels are things that you kind of need the previous movie for, for the context of the material. But I think for the most part, going all the way up, singular character movies, the first film in a singular character series is pretty watchable if you've never seen anything MCU at all. I think Doctor Strange is pretty watchable without anything else. Clearly, there are people seeing Black Panther that have never bothered with the MCU before, and they don't feel left out. And that movie is not connecting real hard to the rest of that universe yet. It's obviously building toward that, but it's a piece of that whole pie, and it's isolated. And you go and you live in that world, and it feels like another world. So I guess my answer is the Avengers films. There are prerequisites. I think. The first Avengers film, there might be, I mean, I know there were people that watched that movie without watching anything before it, so I guess the people were able to enjoy it and appreciate it enough, but with most of those things that are about characters that you've seen already, you're not going to really fully appreciate them, and it's not just a matter of Easter eggs and nods and callbacks and things. Like Tony Stark has a really clear arc going all the way through everything. Now so I said first solo movies, with maybe the exception of Homecoming because of Tony Stark. I still think you can watch that movie and not be lost, but you'll appreciate even Peter Parker's character arc more in comparing him to where Tony Stark was in the first Iron Man film. If you've not seen that, I think it's more difficult to really appreciate even why Tony Stark is in that movie. And I think some folks that feel like, and I mean, people that have watched all those movies, there are some folks that don't get me wrong, that think that Tony has too much screen time and that he takes away from Peter Parker. But I think I have talked to folks that I think felt that more because they're either not real invested in the Iron Man movies and haven't watched them much and don't remember them that well, or didn't watch them at all and were like, what's this Iron Man guy doing in my Spider-Man movie? And I think that he really enhances that character arc if you're really familiar with those movies. Well, folks, that's going to be it for me. I am out of time. Thanks a bunch for watching. I sure appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing folks' comments about stuff I talked about today after the fact. If you are watching this later, thanks so much for clicking on this video. And if you've been here with me for the whole hour, or you popped in sometime in the middle, thanks so much for being here and making this worthwhile and making these Wednesday afternoons so much fun for me. Once again, had a really good amount of viewers popping in to chat with us, had a good group, and as long as there is interest, I will keep doing this on Wednesday afternoons whenever I am available, and so far that has been pretty darn easy. So anyway, I will be back with lots more videos real shortly, and I'm going to go right now and take more notes for Rewind. I'm finally going to try to get that Iron Man 3 review out in the not-too-distant future. I don't want to give you a date or anything, because I don't know how long it's going to take me to realistically to sit down and work on it and write it on it. I've got so much going on, but I am working on that. That's my big project for today. So anyway, once again, thanks for watching. You guys are great. Sure appreciate it. Bye, everybody. Seeing everybody there in the comments. Reptile Dude, Daniel Davis, Blue Dragon 5. Thanks, everybody. You guys are great. Really appreciate you. And thanks again to Danny, too. Bye, everybody.